Hey guys, today I'm working on a 2012 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter 2500. It's the V6 with the 3.0 turbo diesel engine. So this time I'm working on the brakes. It started out with a squeak, a high-pitched squeak coming from one of the wheels about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. At first I thought maybe it's the tattletales on the brake pads that are squeaking, telling me that I need to replace the brake pads. I did an inspection when I rotated the tires. The brake pads looked okay. Now I only checked the outside brake pads, so I'll come back to that, but they looked okay. Put everything back. I thought maybe it was just brake dust. I tried to clean all the calipers. Seemed like it helped a little bit, but then about a week ago, the high-pitched squeak turned into a low growl, grinding noise, and I knew something was wrong. So I did a more thorough inspection. I pinpointed where the sound was coming from the front right tire. I took the tire off and I inspected both sides of the rotor and the brake pads, and the inside pad had worn down to metal and was grinding on my rotor. So anyways, I took it off thinking maybe I could get away with just pads and rotors, but I thought it'd be a good idea to inspect the calipers. And when I took the caliper apart from the bracket adapter, I noticed that one of the guide pins was seized. And that's probably why the inside pad was always touching the rotor, and why it wore that shoe or that pad faster than the outside. So I made the decision to replace both caliper, pads, and rotors on the front, both sides. And so that's what we'll be working on today, is replacing calipers, pads, rotors, along with the rubber piggy tail hose. So let's get started. Okay, as you can see, I've already started the job. Actually, I've already done the other side. So this is the left side that I'm doing now, the second side. So I've got a pretty good idea now of the steps. So obviously, first you want to remove the wheel. And I used the factory bottle jack and the floor jack and a jack stand. So kind of a belt and suspenders and a rope approach. But you definitely want to have something other than the single factory bottle jack to make sure that this vehicle doesn't fall. As far as tools needed, pretty standard tools. I use a breaker bar, a torque wrench, a ratcheting socket, a 10-inch wrench, a 7/16 wrench. This is going to be needed to remove the rubber hose. I'm not sure why it's a 7/16, but that fit the best. I would have thought that'd be a metric. 14 millimeter is going to be used to install the new rubber hose to the caliper right there. I'm not even bothering removing it yet on the old one, since it's probably going to be pretty seized in there. And then I use a stainless steel brush to clean everything up. You need an E8 hexalobular socket, a T25 torque spit. I'm going to use this to remove that fender. Removing that fender gives me a lot more space here to put up my milk crate, which I'm going to use to set my caliper. And then you need a 10 millimeter socket, 11 millimeter socket, a T30 bit. This is a torque spit. We're going to use that to remove this the rotor. And then some pliers, some anti-seize, these little flat blade screwdriver bits I use to unplug the caliper, the brake pad wear sensor, and then some PB blasters. So I hit this E8 bolt, hexalobular bolt that retains the brake pad wear sensor. I hit it with some anti-seize, or not anti-seize, but penetrating fluid yesterday, so hopefully that comes out easy. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove this fender, and then I'm gonna remove this caliper. And to remove the caliper, you just unclip these wires and then remove that bolt and the bolt below that right there. So let's go ahead and do that. To remove this fender, you remove these two Torx bolts, and then you remove the 10mm nut. You pull this inner fender back, and there's two more bolts. There's one right there, right in the middle of the camera. Then there's one over here that's 90 degrees to that other bolt. Both of those bolts have to come out, and then this whole piece comes out. While you're here, you might want to clean behind this little fender. There, for some reason, debris likes to collect back there and can cause corrosion. Okay, I had to stop for a water break, so probably a good time to take a little video. So far I have unclipped the brake pad wear sensor, set it to the side. I try to remove the brake pad wear sensor connector, but unfortunately the head, the bolt was so corroded that I spun the head off, and so I had to use progressively bigger flathead screwdrivers and then a chisel to try to pry off that connector. It's this one right here. You can see it was corroded in there and I couldn't get it off, and I need that. I do have new brake pad wear sensors, but they connect to this end, so I needed that part. The other end I don't need. I just disconnected it. I'm gonna throw that away anyways. So anyways, that came off very carefully, and now and then I removed those two caliper adapter bracket bolts. I removed the little Torx bolt for the rotor. The rotor is set aside, and now I'm ready to disconnect that. So using a 7/16 inch wrench, I'm gonna loosen that. I already kind of cleared the dirt and debris away from here. It likes to build up in here, so I just use a little brush and a little flathead screwdriver to clean that up. And I do have the brake fluid capped, so hopefully not much leaks out through here. And then I'm gonna open that up, disconnect it, and then I've already got my new caliper assembled with this hose. This is just loosely on there. And what I'm gonna do for the new caliper is I'm going to use a syringe and on the new one, and I'm gonna put brake fluid in through here and let it go up this hose, and I'm gonna keep the hose upright. And then when I connect it, hopefully that minimizes the amount of air that's gonna be in this line, so I don't, my bleed process should go quicker. So okay, so right now, like I said, I'm gonna disconnect that rubber hose, and I'm gonna get my new caliper ready by filling it up with brake fluid, get that ready to go. It's already assembled. Let me show you that actually. Let me show you my new caliper. Okay, there's the, I said new caliper. It's technically a remanufactured caliper that I purchased through Euro SD Parts out of San Diego. It was $180, and then you get a $90 back as a core charge when you return the old one. So not a bad deal. It comes with the adapter bracket already, and then I bought the rotors and pads separately as a separate kit. I did buy the hose separately as well. I got that because I figured trying to remove this out of this corroded caliper is probably not gonna go easy. I figured it'd be easier to replace that. There's a lot less corrosion on that one. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna tighten this up. I'm gonna put some brake fluid through here using this syringe. So I got my brake fluid. I'm gonna suck up some brake fluid into the syringe, and then I'm gonna inject it through the bleeder, and I'm gonna keep the hose upright so that it fills up with brake fluid. And then I'm gonna separate that connection, connect this one, and I should be able to minimize the amount of air that's gonna be in the system. So let me do that. I'm gonna inject it with some brake fluid, keep it upright, swap it out, and then I'll take some more video. Okay, I got the caliper swapped out. So what I'm doing, so when I swapped it out, it's really hard to not make a mess, and I really don't like making a mess. So what I did is I put some plastic wrap, saran wrap, on the cap of the brake reservoir. That way it kind of forms a vacuum, and when I disconnect that connection in the middle of the screen, the fluid doesn't come leaking out. And I said it is tricky to keep that upright after you filled it full of new brake fluid. It's tricky to do that and then get the old one removed, but it is possible. And so now that I've got it connected, I have not done the final tightening on that one or that one. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean this hub with a wire brush. I'm gonna clean that hub, and then I'm gonna take some brake cleaner, clean my new brake rotor. Then I'm gonna mount it using that screw that goes right there, and then I'll be ready to install my caliper. I'm gonna snug up those bolts and then do the final tightening on those hoses. The reason you don't wanna do the final tightening on that hose right now is because once we install it, we need to make sure we don't have any twist in that hose. So I'm gonna tighten at the caliper first, and then I may have to readjust up here where it meets the metal tubing. So let me clean up that hub. Let me clean the rotor with some brake cleaner. I'm gonna mount the rotor, and then I'll take more video. Okay, so I mounted the caliper bracket. I tightened the connection here at the caliper with a 14mm socket, and then I tightened that nut on the back with a 7/16 inch wrench. It was a wrench with that one as well, and you can see that the hose it's not twisted. The letters are on the same side. You don't want to have any twist in that, so that's good to go. I had to find another bolt for this little brake sensor connector. So I found a bolt. I think it's a 6mm by 1.0 pitch thread bolt, and then I found it. I put it in there. I did have to clean it up a little bit. Also, the connector has so much corrosion, I actually had to drill it out with a 1/4-inch drill bit so that I could get the bolt in through this connector. So I drilled that out to get rid of the corrosion. And as you can see, I got my new brake pad wear sensor in there. So once I connect this, I just popped that little connector into this, and then I popped the actual sensor into the brake pad. It just pops in. The only thing left to do is I have to torque the caliper bracket adapter bolts. Those are 59 foot-pounds plus 40 degrees. That's these bolts right here, this one and the one below that. So this bolt and the one below that. Honestly, I'm just gonna do 120 pounds with my torque wrench. I found that gets it pretty close to the 59 plus 40. So I'm gonna do 120 pounds, call it good. And then the only thing left to do after that will be to do a brake bleed. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace the fluid. It hasn't been 2 years since the last time I did a brake fluid change, but I'm gonna have to drain most of the fluid anyways to do a proper brake bleed. So I might as well just restart the clock on my brake fluid. So that's it. So anyways, hope this helps you out. Bye. One more thing about, one last thing about the brake, how to bleed the brakes. So I normally do a vacuum brake bleed. I have a vacuum brake bleed tool, and that's normally what I do. I asked an expert, how he would do it after replacing the calipers, and he recommended doing just a gravity brake bleed. So that's what I did. I replaced the brake fluid. I vacuumed out all the brake fluid in the reservoir. I filled it with new brake fluid, and then I started from the furthest caliper away from the reservoir, which would be the rear right. And then I opened the bleeder there. I used a small clear tubing so that I could see the fluid coming out when I opened the bleeder and gravity just forced the fluid out of the bleeder through the clear tubing. I could check for the color of the fluid, and I could check for air bubbles. Of course, there was no air bubbles in the rear, but I did the rear right first, and then I did the rear left, then I did the front right, and then the front left. And when I got to the fronts, doing this gravity brake bleed process, I could see air bubbles coming out of the brake bleeders, the caliper bleeders. And once the air bubbles stopped coming out, then I knew I had gotten all the air out, and I closed the brake bleeders, and it was good to go. So anyways, that was just wanted to mention that because that is different from what I normally do, which is a vacuum brake bleed. Okay, so that's replacing the front brake calipers, pads, and rotors on a Sprinter 2500. Overall, not too bad of a job. I'm gonna leave you with a couple thoughts. So I bought remanufactured calipers. I think if I were to do this job over again, I might reconsider that and maybe get new calipers. So the remanufactured calipers were $180, call it $200 by the time you throw in shipping and taxes, maybe a little bit more, $210. New calipers are roughly, I think, $260, call it $280 with taxes and shipping, so not that much more. Now with the remanufactured, you do get the core charge back, which is roughly $95 per caliper. But you have to pay for the shipping to send them back. And on mine, they're a little corroded. So I am taking the risk that they may not accept my old calipers because they have too much corrosion. In which case, for sure, getting new ones would have been the better deal. The other thing that to consider is that when I got the remanufactured calipers back, I wasn't too happy. I wasn't very happy with the quality of the remanufactured. I had previously done remanufactured parts for Mercedes, specifically the drive shaft, and that drive shaft looked brand new. I couldn't tell it was remanufactured. The calipers I could. And in fact, I inspected them. When I inspected the remanufactured calipers, one of them, the guide pins were messed up. I don't know what the person was doing when they put them back together, but they stripped the head on those guide pin bolts, and the guide pins were not fully seated. So there was a gap. There was some play in those guide pin bolts, which is not good. So I had to take them off, figure out a way to take off those strip bolts, take them off, and then replace those bolts. Luckily, one of the kits I had bought for the brake pads came with new guide bolts, so I didn't have to purchase anything else. But I mean, for $180, you know, almost the price of a new one, they should have been better than that. So I'll just leave you with that. You know, just think about it. You know, maybe just get some new brake calipers. I think, you know, in hindsight, I probably should have done that. So anyways, hope this video helps you out. And again, not that hard of a job. You know, just make sure at the end everything's tight. Double check it, do a test run after you've put everything back. You know, you have to seat in your brake pads, brake rotors, and double check afterwards that you don't have any leaks on any of those brake connections that you took loose. Make sure you do a good brake bleed process, and you should be good to go.